Hello and welcome to another video. In today's episode, we're going to talk about why how you speak is more important than what you say. And for the sake of this video, I'm gonna attempt to do no cuts at editing whatsoever. It's the first time I'm doing this. It's also going to be quite a long video, but it's interesting because of the subject I'm doing this, because speaking is a very important thing in my opinion, which I want to practice, especially because I'm not a native English speaker. So without further ado, let's start. Most people think communication is about words. They believe that if they simply find the right sentence, the right explanation, or the right argument, people will understand them and maybe even agree with them. But if you start paying attention to real conversations, something interesting becomes obvious very quickly. Two people can say the exact same sentence, yet the reaction from the listener can be completely different. One person speaks, and people naturally pay attention, they lean in slightly, they stay engaged, they follow the idea. And another person says the exact same thing, and somehow the moment feels awkward, uncertain, or simply uninteresting. The strange part is that the difference rarely lies in the idea itself. In many cases, the difference comes from something much more less, the way the idea is delivered. The tone of the voice, the rhythm of the voice, the pauses between thoughts. As I told you, I don't want to do any cuts. Doesn't matter if I make mistakes. I want to keep it in one take. Even the small sounds that slip into conversation when someone is thinking. Those tiny oohs sounds, the smaller hesitations, the moment when someone pauses before continuing. All these details together shape the impression a person leaves on others. They influence whether someone sounds confident or unsure, thoughtful or rushed, calm or nervous. In the moment, I'm quite nervous. In other words, the way you speak often determines how people perceive not only your ideas but also your personality. And what makes this fascinating is that almost nobody ever learns how to control these things. We spend years in school learning vocabulary, grammar, and information about the world, yet very rarely does anyone teach us how to actually communicate in a natural and effective way. We learn what to say, but not how to say it. Because of that, most people develop speaking habits unconsciously. They imitate the rhythm of people around them, the patterns they hear in conversations, the tone they hear in movies or podcasts, without ever realizing that speaking itself is a skill that can be observed and improved. Once you start noticing these patterns, you realize something important. Speaking well is not about sounding perfect. It's about sounding intentional. The hidden power of intonation. To understand how powerful delivery really is, imagine a very simple sentence. I have an idea. It is a completely ordinary sentence, something that could appear in almost any conversation. But the moment you start changing the way it's spoken, the emotional meaning of the sentence begins to change. If someone says it in a flat tone, quickly and without emphasis, I have an idea, it simply sounds like a neutral statement. Nothing particularly interesting about it. But imagine the same sentence spoken slightly different. I have an idea. Suddenly the tone changes, the small pause before the second part of the sentence creates anticipation. It suggests that the speaker is thinking carefully, almost inviting the listener to pay attention. Now imagine the same sentence delivered with confidence and energy. I have an idea. I'm not the best at intonation, but this is the point of the video. Now it sounds decisive, as if something important is about to happen. The words themselves never changed, only the intonation changed. This is why speech is much closer to music than people realize. Music is not about the notes themselves, it's about the rhythm, the tempo, silence, and emphasis. In the same way, spoken language is not only about vocabulary, it's about how the voice moves, how it rises and falls, how certain words are emphasized while others remain softer. Great communicators instinctively understand this. When they speak, their voices does not stay flat. It moves naturally, almost like a melody, guiding the listener through the idea. And this movement keeps attention alive, because monotony is one of the fastest ways to lose audience. Why pauses are more powerful than words? One of the most underrated tools in communication is the pause. Most people feel uncomfortable with silence and in conversation. The moment a sentence ends, they feel the need to immediately continue speaking. If there is even a small gap, they quickly fill it with words like so, or you know, or other stuff like that. But silence can actually be incredibly powerful. When a speaker pauses before saying something important, the listener's brain automatically becomes more attentive. The pause creates a small moment of tension, a kind of mental space that makes people curious about what will come next. Think about storytelling for a moment. Imagine someone telling you a story and saying something like this. And then something unexpected happened. That pause before the last part of the sentence instantly makes the moment more interesting. It creates suspense. Without a pause, the sentence would feel much more ordinary. This is why experienced speakers often use silence intentionally. They slow down before important points, allowing the audience a moment to focus. They let their words breathe. And strangely enough, that silence often carries more weight than the words themselves. The truth about oohs and ums, I hate those things in my vocabulary and when I listen to someone on YouTube or something like this. And of course, I want to get rid of them as soon as possible. I'm 23, and by the age of, 26, 27, I want to speak in a very natural way. Many people are embarrassed by hesitation sounds when they speak. Those small things, moments, those small oh or moments can feel mistakes, as if they reveal uncertainty or lack of preparation. But hesitation is actually a natural part of thinking. When we speak, our brain is often constructing ideas in real time. It searches for the right word, organizes the text thought, and prepares the next sentence. Sometimes the mouth continues moving while the brain is still processing. This is where hesitation sounds appear. The real problem is not existence of these sounds. The real problem is frequency. If every sentence is filled with hesitations, so I was thinking, then the listener's attention slowly shifts away from the message and toward the hesitation itself. But when hesitations appear occasionally, it can actually make speech sound more human and natural. Perfect speech can sometimes feel artificial. Small imperfections remind listeners that the real person is speaking, not a script. The goal is not to eliminate hesitation completely, the goal is to become aware of it and learn how to replace unnecessary fillers with something much more powerful. A pause. The rhythm of confidence. There is another subtle signal hidden in the way people speak. and that is the signal of confidence. Interestingly, confidence in speech rarely comes from words themselves. It comes from rhythm. People who feel uncertain often rush through their sentence. They speak quickly, sometimes almost as if they're apologizing for taking up space in the conversation. Their thoughts arrive in long, continuous streams without pauses, because silence feels uncomfortable. Confident speakers behave very differently. They slow down, they allow pauses, they speak as if they have time. And that calm pacing sends a powerful message to the listener. This person is comfortable with their ideas. Ironically, speaking slightly slower often makes someone sound more intelligent and more thoughtful. It gives the impression that each sentence is deliberate. It tells the listener that the speaker is not simply reacting, but actually thinking. In a world where most conversations move too quickly, that kind of calm rhythm becomes surprisingly compelling. Why speaking too fast makes you sound less clear? Many people believe that speaking quickly makes them sound more energetic or more intelligent. Sometimes that can be true in short bursts, especially when someone is excited about a topic. But when someone speaks too fast for long periods of time, the opposite effect often happens. The listener begins to work harder. Instead of simply listening and understanding the idea, the brain has to constantly catch up with the speed of words. And the moment listening becomes an effort, attention slowly disappears. So this is why most engaging speakers rarely maintain the same speed throughout an entire conversation. They change pace. During a story, they might speak slightly faster, letting the narrative flow naturally. But when they arrive at an important point, something interesting happens. They slow down. They give the idea space. They allow the listener time to absorb it. This variation in speed creates rhythm, and rhythm keeps the mind engaged. Speaking well is not about choosing one speed and staying there, it's about learning when to accelerate and when to slow down. Storytelling and the music of speech. The reason storytelling feels so powerful in conversation is not only because of the events being described, but because stories naturally create rhythm. When someone tells a good story, their voice changes. It rises when something exciting happens, it softens when something becomes serious, and it pauses when the moment needs tension. Think about how someone might describe a surprising event. They opened the door and nobody was there. That pause before the final words creates suspense. Without the pause, the moment loses impact. Stories are filled with these tiny moments where delivery shapes the emotion. The same principle applies even where we are not telling stories. Every explanation, every argument, every idea has its own rhythm. Learning to recognize the rhythm is one of the most powerful communication skills anyone can develop. The simple exercise that changes everything. One of the most effective ways to improve the way you speak is surprisingly simple. Record yourself, exactly what I'm doing now. Most people have never listened carefully to their own speaking voice in a long explanation or conversation. When they finally hear it, the experience can feel strange at first. The voice sounds different from the way it feels in your head, and small habits suddenly become very noticeable. You may notice that certain words appear again and again. You may hear how quickly some sentences rush forward without pauses. You may realize that certain fillers sounds appear far more often than you expected. But this awareness is extremely valuable. because once you hear these patterns, you can begin to change them. The goal is not to criticize yourself or try to sound perfect. The goal is to simply become aware of your rhythm. When you know how you sound, you gain the ability to adjust. Learning from great speakers. Another powerful way to improve speaking is through observation. Every great communicator has a certain rhythm to their speech. If you listen carefully, the interviews, the podcast, or public talks, you will begin to notice patterns. Some speakers use pauses masterfully, letting silence create emphasis. Others use subtle changes in tone to guide attention toward important ideas. By observing these patterns, you begin to train your ear. You start to recognize when a sentence needs space. You start to feel when an idea deserves emphasis. Over time, these instincts become natural. The goal is not to imitate someone permanently, but to learn from the techniques they use. Just as a musician learns by studying other musicians, speakers can learn by studying other speakers. The space between words. In everyday conversation, we tend to focus on the words themselves. But often the most meaningful part of communication lies in the spaces between them. Those brief pauses, those moments of silence. Those tiny gaps where the listener has to process what was just said. When someone speaks without ever pausing, the conversation can feel overwhelming. Words arrive continuously without giving the mind time to catch up. But when someone allows space between ideas, the conversation feels calm and clear. The listener feels included in the rhythm. And that subtle sense of clarity makes communication much more powerful. What the way you speak reveals about the way you think. The rhythm of someone's speech often reflects the rhythm of their thinking. When someone's thoughts are scattered, speech often becomes scattered as well. Sentence start before the previous idea is fully finished, filler words appear more frequently, and the message becomes harder to follow. But when thoughts are clear, speech tends to slow down. Ideas arrive in organized pieces. Each sentence builds naturally on the one before it. This is why improving the way you speak often improves the way you think. Speaking forces the mind to organize ideas into structure, and structure creates clarity. The final thought. At first glance, the way someone speaks might seem like a small detail. After all, words carry the message and the idea carry the meaning. But once you begin paying attention to real conversations, it becomes obvious that delivery shapes perception. The rhythm of your voice influences whether people listen carefully or lose focus. The pauses between your sentences determine whether your ideas feel rushed or thoughtful. The tone of your voice signals confidence, curiosity, excitement, or doubt. And the most interesting part is that these elements are not fixed traits. They are habits. Habits that can be observed, habits that can be adjusted. Habits that can slowly improve with awareness and practice. You do not need to become a perfect speaker. You do not need to remove every hesitation or design every sentence in advance. Communication is not about perfection. It's about presence. It's about speaking with intention rather than rushing through words. Because when someone speaks with intention, people notice. They listen more closely, they understand more clearly. And sometimes, without even realizing it, they remember the message long after the conversation ends. That was the video for today. I wanted to stop this video for many times because I think it's kind of cringe because of some pauses that I make or some mistakes that I make during this video. But who cares? Maybe nobody will watch this video. So that was the video for today. I know I need to improve a lot, but I'm training for it. Tell me in the comments below what do you think, and see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye bye.